Before we begin, if you want the full continuation of these stories, more uncensored 18+ Ancient BL content, extended scenes, and unlimited royal forbidden romance, you can join us on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. YouTube does not allow us to show or monetize everything freely here, so the deeper and more intense versions are waiting for you there. You can find the link in the description and pinned comment. The scratching sound of the digital pen was the only thing keeping Jilin awake. His eyes burned. The glowing screen of his tablet felt like a spotlight in the pitch-black room. It was 3 a.m., and he was desperately trying to finish the final panels of a historical BL webcomic he was hired to illustrate. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, and groaned at the script on his desk. "Who wrote this garbage?" he whispered to the empty room. He scrolled through the plot summary. The story was a tragedy about a ruthless, bloodthirsty warlord known as the Ninth Prince, Xiao Jue. The man was practically a monster. According to the lore, Xiao Jue possessed a cursed affliction. He could physically feel it when people lied to him. A lie sounded like a shattered bell in his skull. Because everyone in the imperial court was a scheming liar, the prince had gone half-mad, trusting no one, isolating himself in the frozen north, and executing anyone who tried to play games with him. And the protagonist? A delicate, foolish spy named Song Lan, sent by the emperor as a peace-offering bride. Song Lan was supposed to assassinate the prince on their wedding night. Spoiler alert, Song Lan fails. Miserably. In Chapter 2, he lies to the prince, gets his neck snapped, and his body is thrown into the snow. The end. Jilin sighed heavily. "If I were Song Lan," he muttered, closing his heavy eyelids, "I would just tell the terrifying murder prince the absolute truth. Like, hey, the emperor sent me to kill you, but I'd rather just eat your food and stay alive. Let's be roommates. How hard is that?" He chuckled softly at his own joke. The exhaustion finally caught up to him. His head drooped, his cheek pressed against the cool glass of the drawing tablet. The sound of the rain outside his window faded into a dull hum. And then, the hum turned into a violent rattling. Jilin jolted awake. The air was freezing. The scent of cheap coffee and electronics was gone, replaced by the overwhelming smell of damp pine, old wood, and burning incense. He wasn't sitting at his desk. He was swaying. His eyes snapped open. Red. Everything was red. Heavy crimson silk draped over his head. The space around him was incredibly cramped, shaking violently with every step of whatever was carrying him. He reached up, his hands trembling, and pulled the red veil off his head. His breath hitched in his throat. Long, pale fingers. Elegant, flowing sleeves embroidered with golden threads. He was sitting inside an ancient wooden bridal palanquin. Outside, the deafening sound of rain pounded against the wooden roof, accompanied by the heavy, rhythmic marching of armored boots in the mud. "No," Jilin breathed out. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced his chest. He looked down at himself. He felt his own face. This wasn't a dream. The air was too cold. The silk was too soft. The fear was too real. A voice echoed from outside the palanquin, rough and impatient. "Keep moving! We must deliver the bride to the Ninth Prince's estate before midnight, or His Highness will have all our heads." The Ninth Prince. The bride. Jilin's soul nearly detached from his body. He wasn't just in the comic, he was Song Lan, the cannon fodder, the beautiful, delicate, completely doomed spy who was scheduled to die tonight. "Oh my God," Jilin whispered, clutching his chest. "I am going to die. I am literally going to die in a historical outfit." His mind raced. He remembered the script. The original Song Lan had a poisoned hairpin hidden in his robes. Jilin frantically patted himself down. His fingers brushed against something hard and sharp tucked into his belt. He pulled it out. A silver hairpin, the tip glowing with a faint, deadly blue hue. He stared at it in horror. If he kept this, the prince would find it. If he lied about it, the prince's cursed ability would trigger, and his neck would be snapped. Without a second thought, Jilin shoved the hairpin under the wooden floorboards of the palanquin, burying it completely. He kicked his expensive boots over the spot just to be safe. "Okay," he muttered to himself, taking deep, shaky breaths. "New plan, no assassinations, no lies, just pure, unhinged honesty. I am going to be the most harmless, pathetic, transparent person in this entire empire." The palanquin suddenly lurched to a halt. The heavy iron gates of the Northern Prince's estate groaned open. The sound was like a beast awakening. Jilin swallowed hard. Showtime. The estate of Xiao Jue did not look like a royal palace. It looked like a military fortress built to withstand the end of the world. High stone walls, torches flickering in the freezing rain, and rows of silent, terrifying soldiers dressed in black iron armor. Nobody was cheering. there were no wedding lanterns. A maid opened the curtain of the palanquin. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and terror. "Young master," she whispered, "please step out. His Highness is waiting in the main chamber." Jilin forced his legs to move. He stepped out into the freezing courtyard, the heavy red robes dragging through the wet stone. Every step felt like walking toward an executioner's block. He was led down dark, winding corridors. The silence in the estate was suffocating. Finally, they reached massive double doors carved with snarling wolves. The guards pushed the doors open, shoved Jilin inside, and slammed them shut behind him. The room was vast, lit only by a few flickering candles. The shadows danced dangerously against the walls. And there he was, sitting at the center of the room, casually polishing a terrifyingly long sword, was the ninth prince, Xiao Jue. Jilin stopped breathing. The comic illustrations did not do this man justice. Xiao Jue was massive, broad, intimidating shoulders draped in dark, fur-lined robes. His hair was long, dark as a raven's wing, falling over a face that looked like it was sculpted from cold marble. His jawline was sharp enough to cut glass, but it was his eyes that froze Jilin in place. They were silver, cold, piercing, and completely devoid of warmth. Xiao Jue did not look up from his sword. His voice, when he finally spoke, was deep, raspy, and sent a shiver straight down Jilin's spine. "The Emperor is getting desperate," Xiao Jue murmured, the scrape of the whetstone against the steel echoing in the quiet room, sending a boy who trembles like a leaf to do an assassin's job. Jilin's heart hammered against his ribs. The prince set the sword down. He slowly stood up, towering over Jilin, and closed the distance between them. Xiao Jue stopped mere inches away. Jilin could smell the scent of cold rain, leather, and something darkly metallic. The prince raised a hand, his large, calloused fingers gripping Jilin's chin, forcing him to look up into those terrifying silver eyes. "Tell me, little bird," Xiao Jue whispered, his thumb brushing dangerously against Jilin's throat. "Where is the weapon you brought to kill me?" This was it. The moment of truth. The moment the original character lied, triggered the prince's curse, and died. Jilin looked straight into Xiao Jue's eyes. He didn't blink. He opened his mouth, and the truth just poured out. "I hid it under the floorboards of the carriage because I realized I absolutely do not want to die today. The Emperor sent me to kill you, yes, but I am incredibly weak. I have no combat skills, and frankly, I just want to live here quietly, eat your food, and not be murdered. Please." Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Xiao Jue froze. His silver eyes widened, just a fraction. For the past 10 years, every single time someone spoke to the prince, a painful, irritating pressure had built up in his skull. Every flattery, every denial, every political promise, it all rang with the agonizing distortion of a lie. He had expected the familiar sharp pain to hit his mind the moment this boy opened his mouth. But there was nothing. Only perfect, pristine silence. The truth. A completely shameless, pathetic, ridiculous truth. Xiao Jue stared at Jilin. He stared at him for so long that Jilin began to sweat under his heavy robes. "You?" Xiao Jue's voice lowered, sounding almost confused. "You hid the weapon in the carriage." "Yes," Jilin nodded eagerly, his voice shaking slightly. "It was a poisoned hairpin. Very cliché. I kicked my boots over the floorboards so nobody would see. I don't want to fight you. I would lose immediately. Have you seen your arms? You could snap me like a twig." Xiao Jue's fingers slowly slipped away from Jilin's chin. The prince's mind was utterly quiet. The boy was telling the complete, unvarnished truth. He really was just terrified, cowardly, and admiring his arms. Xiao Jue's expression turned incredibly complicated. He turned his back, walking slowly toward the table, pouring himself a cup of wine. "You are either a master of deception," he murmured, his back still turned, "or you are the biggest fool the capital has ever produced." "Definitely the fool, Your Highness," Jilin said quickly. 100% fool." Xiao Jue paused, the wine cup halfway to his lips. He let out a sound that might have been a scoff, or perhaps a very dry laugh. "Sit down," he ordered. Jilin practically collapsed onto the nearest cushion. The night passed in agonizing awkwardness. Xiao Jue did not speak again. He simply drank his wine, occasionally casting a sharp, analytical glance at the boy shivering in the corner. Jilin, true to his word, sat as still as a houseplant, desperately trying not to draw attention to himself. When morning finally came, the servants were shocked. They opened the doors expecting to drag out a corpse. Instead, they found their terrifying warlord reading a military scroll, while his new bride was fast asleep, drooling slightly onto the expensive silk pillows. And just like that, Jilin survived the first night. Days turned into weeks, and Jilin discovered that living in the Demon of the North's estate was actually pretty great. Because everyone was absolutely terrified of Xiao Jue, nobody dared to bully the prince's new spouse. The servants kept their heads down, the food was surprisingly good, and Xiao Jue himself was rarely around during the day, occupied with military drills. But things changed at night. Xiao Jue suffered from severe insomnia. The cursed ability to detect lies meant that being in the presence of his own generals and advisors was mentally exhausting. The world was full of deceit, and the prince's mind bore the weight of it. Until Jilin. For Xiao Jue, being near Jilin was like finding an oasis in a burning desert. The boy's mind was a glass of clear water. He didn't scheme, he didn't plot. If the food was too spicy, he complained. If the room was too cold, he whined. It was annoying, but it was honest. And Xiao Jue found himself deliberately seeking out that honesty. One evening, Jilin was wandering through the inner courtyards, trying to find his way back to his room. He took a wrong turn and ended up near the martial arts training grounds. Through the heavy rain that always seemed to blanket the north, Jilin saw him. Xiao Jue was training alone. He had stripped off his heavy upper robes. He was wearing only loose dark trousers, his skin glistening with sweat and rain. He wielded a massive polearm, his movements fluid, powerful, and devastatingly precise. Every strike cut through the air with a sharp whistle. Jilin froze behind a stone pillar. His modern artist brain immediately went into overdrive. The anatomy, the muscle definition, the way the water drips down his back. Holy hell, this man is a walking masterpiece. Without realizing it, Jilin leaned closer, completely captivated by the display of pure, raw strength. Suddenly, Xiao Jue's movements stopped. He didn't even turn his head. "How long do you plan to hide there and stare, little bird?" Xiao Jue's voice cut through the sound of the rain, deep and commanding. Jilin jumped, nearly knocking his head against the pillar. He slowly stepped out into the open, clutching his robes awkwardly. "I wasn't spying on your military techniques, I swear." Xiao Jue turned slowly. His silver eyes locked onto Jilin. The rain plastered his dark hair against his face. He leaned the polearm against his shoulder and stepped closer. "Then what were you doing?" Xiao Jue asked softly. The lie-detecting curse was ready, waiting for the boy to make up an excuse. Jilin swallowed hard. He looked at Xiao Jue's bare chest, then quickly looked away, his ears burning bright red. "I got lost, and then I stopped. Because you look incredibly handsome swinging that thing around, and I got distracted." The silence in the courtyard was absolute. Xiao Jue stared at him. The curse in his mind remained perfectly quiet. It was the truth. The terrifying, bloodthirsty warlord of the north blinked. For the very first time in his life, a faint, visible flush crept up the back of his neck. "You?" Xiao Jue cleared his throat, suddenly looking extremely uncomfortable. He grabbed a towel and threw it over his shoulder, covering himself. "You are completely shameless." "You asked," Jilin protested, stepping back. "I'm just trying not to get killed for lying." Xiao Jue didn't say another word. He walked past Jilin, his steps a little faster than usual. But as he passed, Jilin noticed something. The corners of the prince's mouth were turned up, just a fraction. A smile. The demon of the north was smiling. From that day on, the dynamic between them shifted. The silent, terrifying distance closed, replaced by a strange, magnetic pull. And if you are enjoying this forbidden royal tension, remember, the extended and uncensored 18+ continuation is available on Patreon at SpicyAncientBL. The link is in the description and pinned comment. The closer they became, the more dangerous their reality grew. Word reached the capital that Song Lan had not only failed his assassination mission, but was somehow still alive and residing in the prince's inner chambers. The emperor grew paranoid. The empress dowager began moving her pieces. But inside the fortress, isolated from the political storm, Jilin was entirely focused on the man in front of him. It was deep into the winter. The cold was agonizing. One night, a massive blizzard struck the northern region, cutting off the estate's supplies and freezing the inner chambers. Jilin was shivering uncontrollably in his bed, buried under 3 layers of blankets, unable to sleep. Suddenly, the door to his chamber creaked open. A tall silhouette stepped inside. "Your Highness," Jilin whispered, peeking out from the blankets. Xiao Jue walked over silently. He was wearing his heavy sleeping robes, his hair loose around his shoulders. He looked exhausted. The bags under his eyes were dark. The constant political messages arriving from the capital were full of lies, and his head was pounding. Without asking for permission, Xiao Jue lifted the blankets and climbed into the bed. Jilin instantly froze. "Wait, what are you doing?" You are shivering, Xiao Jue said, his voice raspy and low, and my head hurts. Be quiet and let me rest. He pulled Jilin against his chest. Jilin stopped breathing entirely. The heat radiating from the prince's body was incredible. It was like being wrapped around a furnace. Xiao Jue's strong arms banded around Jilin's waist, pulling him flush against his chest. Jilin's back was pressed against the prince's heart. He could hear it beating. Steady. Powerful. Your Highness, Jilin squeaked, his face burning up. This is highly inappropriate. Is it? Xiao Jue murmured, his breath brushing against the nape of Jilin's neck, sending violent shivers down his spine. Tell me you want me to leave, and I will. Xiao Jue waited. He waited for the lie. He waited for the boy to say leave while meaning stay. But Jilin bit his lip. He closed his eyes, feeling the overwhelming safety of the man's embrace. He could smell the sandalwood and the cold winter air on Xiao Jue's skin. He felt the heavy, protective weight of the arm around his waist. No, Jilin whispered into the dark. Don't leave. Silence in the mind. Perfect, absolute truth. Xiao Jue exhaled a long, shaky breath. He buried his face into Jilin's hair, pulling him even closer. Good, the prince whispered. That night, for the first time in 10 years, Xiao Jue slept without nightmares. But peace in an ancient royal story never lasts. The turning point came during the winter solstice hunt. The emperor commanded all the royal princes to attend a grand hunting event near the borders. Xiao Jue had no choice but to go, and as his official spouse, Jilin was forced to accompany him. The moment they arrived at the royal encampment, the atmosphere was suffocating. Every noble, every minister, every prince looked at Xiao Jue with poorly disguised terror and hatred, and they looked at Jilin with mocking curiosity. The crown prince, Xiao Jue's eldest brother, approached them during the evening banquet. He was a man with a smiling face and venomous eyes. Ah, my dear brother, the crown prince sneered, eyeing Jilin up and down. I see the emperor's gift has tamed the northern wolf. Tell me, Song Lan, how exactly does one survive sharing a bed with a monster? The entire tent went dead silent. Xiao Jue's hand rested on the hilt of his sword. His silver eyes turned murderous. His mind was ringing with the hypocritical, lying thoughts of everyone in the room. He was ready to draw blood. But before Xiao Jue could move, Jilin stood up. He didn't cower. He didn't hide behind his robes. He looked the crown prince directly in the eye. He is not a monster, Jilin said, his voice ringing out clearly in the silent tent. He is an honorable man. He protects the borders while the rest of you sit in warm tents drinking wine. And as for sharing his bed, Your Highness, it is the safest place in this entire rotten empire. The crowd gasped. Xiao Jue froze. He stared at Jilin's back. The absolute truth of those words washed over his mind like a cooling rain. He doesn't fear me. He actually believes I am honorable. He feels safe with me. The crown prince's face twisted in fury. You insolent little... Enough, Xiao Jue's voice boomed, echoing like thunder. He stood up, towering over the room. He grabbed Jilin's hand, his grip tight and fiercely protective. We are leaving. No one dared to stop them. But the crown prince's humiliation would not go unanswered. The next day, during the hunt deep in the snowy forest, the trap was sprung. Jilin was riding a slow, gentle horse near the rear of the procession when a sudden volley of arrows rained down from the trees. Chaos erupted. Shouts echoed through the frozen woods. Men disguised as bandits swarmed the royal guards. But they weren't targeting the emperor. They were targeting Xiao Jue. Jilin saw it before anyone else. A sniper, hidden in the branches above, was aiming a heavy crossbow directly at Xiao Jue's back, while the prince was fighting off 3 men at once. Xiao Jue, Jilin screamed. Without thinking, without a single moment of hesitation, Jilin kicked his horse, lunging forward. He threw himself off the saddle, tackling Xiao Jue to the snowy ground, just as the crossbow snapped. A sickening thud echoed in the air. Jilin gasped. A blinding, agonizing pain ripped through his shoulder. The heavy iron bolt had pierced right through his flesh, pinning him to the snow. The world seemed to stop spinning. Xiao Jue looked down. Time froze. He saw the blood blooming across Jilin's pale robes, bright red against the white snow. Something inside the demon of the north finally snapped. Xiao Jue let out a roar that shook the very trees. It wasn't the sound of a warlord. It was the sound of a man watching his world get torn away. What followed was not a battle. It was a massacre. Jilin's vision blurred. He could only see flashes of silver steel and crimson blood. Xiao Jue moved like a phantom, cutting down the assassins with a terrifying, merciless rage. Nobody could touch him. Nobody could escape him. When the last body hit the snow, the forest fell completely silent. Xiao Jue dropped his sword. He dropped to his knees in the snow beside Jilin, his large, blood-stained hands shaking violently as he hovered over the wound. "You fool!" Xiao Jue choked out, his voice cracking. "You stupid, reckless fool. Why did you do that? You have no martial arts. You could have died." Jilin coughed, tasting copper. He looked up at the terrifying, blood-soaked prince. He reached out a trembling hand, brushing his fingers against Xiao Jue's cheek. "Because," Jilin whispered, his breath shallow, "because I like your smile, and I didn't want you to die." Xiao Jue's breath hitched. The truth of it slammed into his chest, breaking through every wall he had ever built. "Stay awake," Xiao Jue commanded, his voice thick with raw emotion. He carefully picked Jilin up in his arms, holding him impossibly close. "You stay awake. Do you hear me? You are not allowed to leave me in the silence again." Jilin closed his eyes, leaning his head against Xiao Jue's chest. "Okay," he whispered. For 3 days and 3 nights, Jilin burned with a terrible fever. He was vaguely aware of the chaos around him. The royal physicians rushing in and out, the scent of bitter medicinal herbs, and always the heavy, constant presence of Xiao Jue sitting by the bed, refusing to sleep, refusing to leave. When Jilin finally opened his eyes, the room was bathed in the soft, golden light of sunset. His shoulder throbbed, but the fever was gone. He turned his head. Xiao Jue was sitting in a chair beside the bed. The prince looked completely ragged. He hadn't shaved. He was wearing wrinkled robes, his eyes were closed, and his head was bowed. "Your Highness?" Jilin croaked, his throat completely dry. Xiao Jue's eyes snapped open. He shot out of the chair, leaning over the bed. He didn't say a word. He just stared at Jilin, his silver eyes filled with an emotion so intense it made Jilin's heart race. Slowly, Xiao Jue reached out, his warm, rough fingers gently brushing the hair away from Jilin's pale forehead. "You're awake," Xiao Jue whispered. "I told you I wouldn't leave," Jilin said softly, trying to force a smile. Xiao Jue's jaw tightened. "You saved my life. You would have done the same for me." "You are a terrible liar," Xiao Jue said, his voice dropping to a low, husky register. "You know I wouldn't have. Before I met you, I would have let anyone die if it served my purpose." Xiao Jue leaned closer. His gaze dropped to Jilin's lips. The distance between them vanished, leaving only the charged, magnetic pull they had been circling around for months. "Jilin," Xiao Jue murmured. Jilin's eyes widened slightly. You know my real name?" "You muttered many strange things in your fever," Xiao Jue said softly, his thumb tracing Jilin's jawline. "About metal carriages, about drawing pictures on glass, about a world I do not understand." Xiao Jue paused. The silence between them was heavy, thick with unresolved tension. "Are you going to leave me?" Xiao Jue asked. It was the most vulnerable the prince had ever sounded. He was waiting for the lie. He was waiting for his curse to ring and tell him this boy was a phantom who would eventually disappear. Jilin looked up into those silver eyes. He thought of his small, lonely apartment. He thought of his stressful deadlines. And then he looked at the man in front of him, a terrifying warlord who held him like he was the most precious thing in the world. "No," Jilin whispered. "I'm exactly where I want to be." Complete, beautiful silence in the prince's mind. Xiao Jue finally closed the distance. He kissed him. It wasn't a rushed, desperate kiss. It was slow, tender, and incredibly deep. Xiao Jue's large hand cupped the back of Jilin's neck, holding him gently, as if afraid he might break. The prince's lips were warm, mapping out Jilin's mouth with a slow, possessive reverence. Jilin let out a soft breath, his uninjured arm wrapping around Xiao Jue's broad shoulders, pulling the prince closer. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing heavily. Xiao Jue rested his forehead against Jilin's, his silver eyes dark with emotion. "You are mine now," Xiao Jue whispered fiercely. "No emperor, no crown prince, no other world will take you from me." Jilin smiled, his heart fluttering wildly in his chest. "I wasn't planning on running away." The aftermath of the assassination attempt changed the political landscape forever. Xiao Jue did not let the attack go unpunished. With Jilin safe, the northern prince finally unleashed his full power. He marched his black-armored soldiers right to the gates of the capital. He dragged the corrupt ministers who had organized the ambush out of their manners. He confronted the crown prince in the middle of the imperial court. With his lie-detecting ability, Xiao Jue ripped through every defense, exposing the royal family's treason, their embezzlements, and their murderous plots. The emperor, terrified of the northern army, stripped the crown prince of his title and exiled him. For the first time in history, the demon of the north had conquered the capital not with bloodshed, but with the terrifying, undeniable truth. When it was all over, Xiao Jue did not take the throne. He simply turned his back on the golden palace, mounted his horse, and rode back to the cold, quiet north. Back to the only person whose truth mattered. Winter turned into early spring. The snow in the northern estate finally began to melt, making way for small, green sprouts in the courtyard. Jilin was sitting on the wooden veranda, wrapped in a thick fur cloak, sketching with a piece of charcoal on parchment. He was trying to capture the exact angle of the sunlight hitting the stone walls. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Before Jilin could turn, two strong arms wrapped around him from behind, pulling him back against a solid chest. Xiao Jue rested his chin on the top of Jilin's head. "What are you drawing?" Xiao Jue asked, his deep voice vibrating against Jilin's back. "You," Jilin said, tilting the parchment. It was a sketch of Xiao Jue swinging his polearm in the rain. Xiao Jue chuckled softly, a sound that Jilin had grown to love more than anything. The prince reached down, taking the charcoal from Jilin's fingers, and intertwined their hands instead. "The capital sent another messenger today," Xiao Jue murmured, pressing a soft kiss to Jilin's temple. "They want me to return and take a position in the high court." Jilin leaned back into the embrace. "And what did you tell them?" "I told them my spouse complains when it's too hot in the south, and I refuse to deal with his whining." Jilin gasped, slapping Xiao Jue's arm playfully. "You did not." "I did?" Xiao Jue smiled against his hair, and it was the truth. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the snow slowly melt away. Jilin knew his old world was gone forever. But as he sat there, feeling the warmth of Xiao Jue's hands, listening to the steady, calm heartbeat of the man who had once terrified an entire empire, he realized he didn't miss it at all. He had changed the story. He had saved the villain. And in return, the villain had given him a love that was absolute, fearless, and undeniably true. If you want the next part, the uncensored continuation, and more unlimited 18+ Ancient Royal BL stories, come join Spicy Ancient BL on Patreon. The link is waiting for you in the description and pinned comment.